Too often business owners today are focusing on the little things in business. They're ordering supplies, dealing with employees, and dealing with customers, when what we should be focusing on is the most important thing, cash flow. I've grown over 10 businesses from the ground up. In this podcast, you'll learn the ins and outs of building a business and how to build transferable value. And most importantly, you'll learn how to maximize cash. They call me Cash Flow Mike, and this is the clear path to cash. Hey, it's Cash Flow Mike, and welcome to the Clear Path to Cash podcast. And I'm with Gary Vaughn. And Gary Vaughn is the Executive Director of Marketing for Wayland Baptist University. And we're going to talk about trademarks today because it's something that I've had some experience in recently, not as well as he has. So we're going to talk about it. Gary, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Glad to be here.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, here's the reason why it's important to me. Mainly it's because, well, I had a bad experience, right? I had a bad experience, and I want to kind of let other small business owners know how difficult the process is. But you've had kind of some opposite experience, maybe with some challenges, but there's also an easier way to do things that I think you know as well. And I want to talk about that as we get into this show. So you about ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Hey, just as a reminder, I want to make sure that you guys know that we are on Google, we're on Apple, we're on Spotify, you name it, we're there. Subscribe and like and be notified of every new episode, including this one with Gary Vaughn. And Gary, kind of let everybody kind of know, what you do, right? How'd you get there?
Right. I came from a Big 12 school, and they hired me to be the very first marketing director that the Wayland Baptist University had ever had. In their 110-year history. And they looked around and said, we've got to do more to get our name out. The landscape is changing. We've got to do more. And, when I came on board, I saw a lot of things that I had experienced in my career that was not happening. And one of those was we didn't have our names trademarked. Our logos were not. And some of that stuff was very unique. And I felt like it was important that we had a handle on that. I also knew that we were ramping up with our athletic department to be nominated for a national basketball award. And I thought if we got that award, we would be on a national stage, and we would need to have good graphics, and we would need to have something that, more people would see it. And so we didn't want anybody stealing our look or our idea. Being a university, there's not a lot of threat to, stealing the name, but we had some unique challenges.
So that's really interesting, though, right, Gary? Because here it is. You're saying it's a Big 12 school, nationally known, getting national recognition, and they've got all of these marks or logos or sayings, things like that, but they weren't protected. Right. No. Is that normal? I mean, is that normal? I mean, from a small business owner's perspective, I would think that that's always protected, that it's, locked tight.
It's not normal, but it's more common than you might realize. And we were fortunate. One of our alumni was an attorney that had enough intellectual property background that he offered to help us out. And we approached him, and, so we got a good rate, but the process was fascinating to me, and you probably experienced this, is that it's just not a matter of, hey, here's our look, here's our logo, and we like to trademark it, or protect it in some way. So there's two levels. There's the trademark, and then there's the registration. Registration carries a lot more protection and weight. The trademark is kind of the interim when you're looking. But what I learned, and if you're doing a small business, this is what I would do, is start out right away with your look and trademark it. All you have to do that is put that TM logo at the end of your graphic. And that protects you while you're in this process, which for us took almost just over a year to finalize. And yet we felt like we had a slam dunk. But it's the time. You got to go through the process, the research, the lawyer fees, all that stuff.
Well, and that's true because, my experience, you said, it was just a little bit different than that. But we had two searches on a name that we chose for our first product that we were going out the door with here at Simplex Financials. And we thought it was a slam dunk, right? Very low risk. Two different lawyers had looked at this. We went all the way through the application, and the first process still takes about 90 days before you even get, hey, we're going to publish it, which means, and I don't know what they're called, an agent or an officer at the trademark office looks at it, reviews your application, and says, yeah, I don't see anything wrong with it. We can publish it to see if anybody else objects, right? Is that kind of your same experience? I mean,
Yeah,
does everyone?
So we had our attorney look at all the items. In fact, he advised us that our presidential seal was so unique that he wouldn't advise at the time spending the money to trademark that one right away. But our logo for the university, our academic logo, had a very unique symbol, which was a stylized flame. What made that unique for us is we have a 30-foot replica of that flame on the side of one of our buildings. And so that's us. That's who we are. And if someone, and this is what I looked at, Mike, I said, if someone saw that flame and said, that's super cool, I want to do that. I'm an outdoor flame, a campfire person, and that flame looks perfect. I'll make a logo out of it. At that point, they could have, because we did not have that protected. We did not have the rights to that. Even though it's been on our building for 25 years, we had no rights to it. So I said, that's number one. Number two is we had a women's basketball team with a storied history. Started in 1948, had a winning streak of 131 consecutive games. That record has still not been broken. And they got their nickname, the Flying Queens, because of a sponsor and the fact that they flew on these little, I call them puddle jumper planes, at different games. And in our small West Texas neck of the woods, you couldn't find a really competitive athletic female team at the time. So they were flying to Russia, to Mexico, all across. Yeah. And the sponsor owned the flying service. So the media kind of called them the Flying Queens, and I'm like, because the original sponsor was the Harvest Queen Mill, who did grain here in Plainview. And so they kind of merged that name, the Flying, and then the sponsor, the Queens. And it kind of stuck in the media back in the late 40s, early 50s. And they had a 7-year run of undefeated. I thought, that's just it. I mean, with all that's going on in the world, I mean, somebody could pick up that name and have more money than us and said, hey, we like this name for our purpose. And I thought, we have too much of a storied history to let that go. So that was another thing we decided. We decided on the name itself, how to write it, not so much a logo, but just the name. So we trademarked that. And then, of course, we went ahead and trademarked our new athletic logo, because we had had an official athletic logo up until about 2003. And it was just it was a hand-drawn look. And I thought, we need to step up, especially if we're going to go on this national stage. We need to make it look cleaner, make it more user-friendly for all the different formats, television, print, social media, all that. So we made all those changes while we were going through this process. And I remember getting the first letter from the attorney that said, we filed it all. Here's your bill. I was like, good gravy. That's a lot. But, I figured it was the right thing to do. The president of the university was all on board with it, and he helped with the funding for that. And we went forward. And then I think it was about 6 months later, we got the next letter that said, we are now pushing this through. The review has been done. Nobody else has anything like this. So we feel confident that to move it forward. So then it moved into that stage where they're going to publish it in their little book or website, where it's open to the world to see if anybody else can claim it as their own. And I think we waited 90 days to get that letter.
Yeah. Now, did anyone file an objection with yours?
we were fortunate. Nobody filed an objection.
Yeah.
Nobody came anywhere close to our flame. No one objected to the name. The other thing we had to do was document the first use of all these logos and names that we wanted to trade. And I'm like, well, one of these we've been using since 1948. One we've been using since 1908. And then this athletic logo we started in 2018. So just a year before. So I was a little nervous that one might not fly through.
Right.
Because I did what I thought was enough research on the new athletic logo, which is just a stylized W and the word Wayland written through it. And then all of a sudden one day I'm just Googling something else and I see a W written very similar. And I'm like, oh no, are they going to say this? I copied them? I'm like, I had no idea. I didn't. This is market for a long time. But it's different enough. And I think you had this experience. It was a completely different category. And so it didn't appeal. And we filed for apparel, education, and one other one. Just name recognition. So you can file trademarks in several categories. Well, that price just keeps going up if you file it.
Right. They'll keep taking your money, won't they, Gary?
You don't need to file it in the food service industry because it's not food, and nobody's going to see your logo in the food service.
But it's interesting you said that because we did have an objection, right? And it was an objection from a larger public company that kind of sent us for a loop because we're not even in the same, industry even, where they make computer chips or for the aerospace industry, and we made a SaaS-based, small business and financial analysis product. I'm like going, I don't think the market's going to be confused if I'm looking for a computer chip for some type of Mars rover versus or an airplane versus I'm looking for something to analyze my QuickBooks. So, but hey, let me just kind of break in here and just remind people that this is a great conversation with Gary Vaughn, and we're talking about trademarks. And subscribe and like and find us on Apple and Google and those type of things. And what I want to know next, Gary, is have you ever had to name something? Because we had to do that twice over the last 6 months, is come up with a name for a new product. And I've found it to be the most difficult thing I've ever done in business is putting a name to something. I mean, I have 3 daughters and they were easier to name than the product. So have you ever named something?
Other than my daughter's unique name, I guess, no, I really haven't had a chance to come up with anything super unique name wise. But our really challenge was we had a unique name to begin with that had been out in the public for some 70 years and had gone unprotected and unscathed. And I thought, as we approach this award ceremony, if we were to get nominated and get in, which we did, then the name Flying Queens was going to become, in my mind, a household name, or could be. And it was going to be on ESPN2. Ahmad Rashad was going to say it out loud. There was going to have other announcers. Going to have NBA players that were there, WNBA players there. People are going to know who we are. And somebody could easily say, that's a clever name. I think I'll take my little high school here and change the name of our mascot to that because it's super cool.
Right.
But, we got through the process and, even though they don't fly anymore the same way they did, it's part of their story and they're still called that today. And we just felt the need to protect it.
Yeah. But here's the problem that I had with finding a name, and the one you're describing is very unique, and I don't see anybody being able to pull it off other than you guys, right? With the history since the 40s of that name. But with me, in my experience recently, not only do you have to come up with a name, and I'm surprised at how many just made up gobbledygook type words are trademarked. Yeah. You can put a string of letters together that make absolutely no sense and somebody has a trademark on it. So first of all, finding something you can trademark is difficult. Secondly, if you find something you can trademark, you might not be able to get the domain because somebody might not have paid for a trademark, but they bought up the domain for $1.40 and they want you to buy it. And then you've got all the social media handles. And, if you're a true marketer, like you are, a true professional, you want a consistent look, feel, everything across the entire spectrum. I mean, is that right? I mean, it's got to be hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you want your hashtag to be, flying queens, not something, queens that fly. You want it to stay consistent. And you're exactly right. You've got to have all that across the landscape. And again, for us, it wasn't terribly difficult. It was just that a lot of paperwork and a lot of waiting to get it in. But I can tell you that in July of 2019, we had just been told that we got the award, and we'd be celebrating in Massachusetts in September. And I opened up a letter from the attorney, and it was like, here's the certificates from the U.S. Patent Office, and it had the seal. And I mean, you talk about, it's like giving birth. Like, here. Yeah. So it really,
we're protected.
Finally. Yeah. So, 5 o'clock as I was leaving, I shared that with our president that we had gotten all those done, and they were super excited. And now when you see our logos, we're really trying to be diligent to keep that registration mark on those, so that people will know that it's ours, and it's a pride thing too. We
That's right. Sure.
Hard to get it.
Well, and you talk about the waiting. I think that's the hardest part, right? Because, I mean, again, we had a larger public company file an objection to the use of the mark. And it's a 90-day extension. They didn't file the objection saying we couldn't use it. It was a 90-day extension, meaning we don't know if this is a violation of our trademark, but we want to look at it closer for 90 days. So if you're having a timing issue where maybe you're trying to prepare for an award, or you're trying to launch a new product or things like that, that 90 days really puts a kink into it. And here's what I found out. It doesn't stop there. They can continue to file these extensions maybe for another year, right? I mean, I'm like going, how is that even possible that they can just prolong it, not even file an objection, but just keep you from moving forward just by asking for more time?
Yeah. Well, and for example, we have a couple of sports on campus that before I got here, that they created their own version of the logo for their sport. And, as across one logo for the entire athletic team is the ideal plan. And when we looked at the logo for the baseball team, it was just a straight knockoff of a national team. But when we looked it up, they weren't using that logo officially on the national team's uniforms anymore, but they still own the patent trademark on it.
Oh, got it.
And they had just renewed it for another 7 years or whatever. So, we were in violation. Nobody had called us on it, but it was just ethically the right thing to do to not be using that. And that just stems from, somebody said, hey, I like this look. So if we change it a little bit, it becomes ours. You got to change it a lot to become yours. And changing color, and basically if you turned it upside down, it looked just like theirs.
Oh, wow.
And so we had to point that out, that, we can't. That's another reason we needed to do something. Be in violation. We want people to respect our stuff. We need to respect their stuff.
Well, you don't want people to think them when they see you.
Exactly.
Right. So, hey, I mean, super important stuff, right? This trademarks, protecting your brand, protecting your image. I mean, it's super important, and it's a long process, kind of expensive, but a necessary evil. I mean, I think you should protect your brand. So, Gary, I tell you what, I always end the show with one question, right? And I ask the person because I think my listeners like to know what that little nugget is, that little piece of advice. So if you had a best friend that was wanting to start a small business, right? And you guys were talking across the kitchen table this morning, and he says, hey, you got any advice for me? What would that be? What would your advice be?
I think, to me, the best advice that I've ever received was, find your niche, create, a logo or brand that fits that says this is what we are, and stay with it, stay consistent, and plow through, because that's going to keep. It's the same reason that we reach for Tupperware to put our leftovers in, or we reach for a Kleenex. They were the first to name that, and it became a household name. You want to be the first. You want to keep it consistent. Now, yeah, there's other options. Ziploc, all those other people make containers, puffs, and all those make tissue. But being first, being consistent, that's what gets you recognition. Mm-hmm. And then hold true. If you're a brand, stay with your brand.
Oh, very good. Hey, Gary, great conversation with you today. I really appreciate it, man. I always learn something on these, right? I always do. And hey, if you're a first-time listener, this has been the Clear Path to Cash. I'm Cashflow Mike and Gary Vaughn. Any final words?
I really appreciate the time to talk about it. I'm excited that we got to do that, and if we can help someone else that is working toward a trademark, then hopefully this was helpful.
I think it was. So again, Cashflow Mike, Clear Path to Cash. And as always, don't be a dumb business owner.